Hello NQ Jazz fans and welcome to the latest edition of the NQ Jazz podcast. Today I am talking to one of the national treasures of the British jazz scene, the saxophonist and composer Mark Lockhart. It's a great chat. We talk about his career, his influences, some behind the scenes things from his recordings, his commissions and a whole host of other things besides, so I hope you enjoy. As always, I would love to direct you towards patreon.com/NQJazz, where for a very small monthly fee you can check out about 50 hours worth now of concert footage, of silent movies with improvised soundtracks, a whole host of other podcast interviews, and you would be helping us keep musicians employed in this difficult period and keeping some creative practice going. So please do consider heading over to our Patreon page and sit back in the meantime and enjoy the interview with Mark Lockhart. Lovely. Well, hello Mark Lockhart and welcome to the NQ Jazz podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. How have you been keeping the last 6 months or so of the strange new world we live in?
Yeah, I think I've been okay. I mean, I did actually get COVID quite badly.
Yeah.
But I don't particularly want to go into that too much.
Yeah, of course.
But no, I was. I couldn't actually say no. Everything's great, and you know.
Yeah, of course. But the positive thing is you're looking very well, and hopefully back to yourself.
Yeah, and I'm getting better than I was, but it put me out of action for a bit. But
yeah.
But no, it's been okay. I've been kind of, particularly the last couple of weeks, I've been getting more motivated and started to write some things again and practicing, trying to get rid of COVID chops. You know what that's like. You know, when you're not doing gigs and you're not playing, you feel very rusty. You know.
I feel like that's the jazz buzz term of 2020 is COVID chops, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. There's going to be an awful lot of COVID suites being written and stuff.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so, listen, Mark, you've had an exceptionally, I would say, eclectic career in music with artists you've worked with and all of that, which we'll get into along the way. But I want to jump back a bit and just what first got you excited about jazz? What turned you on to wanting to be a jazz musician in the first place and picking up the saxophone and all of the rest of it?
Well, I probably have to blame my father for that, because my dad was always into jazz, so he played records all the time, and so I would wake up on a Sunday morning to the sound of Ella Fitzgerald and Count Basie and Oscar Peterson and various things.
Great.
And then when I was about 10, we moved to America with my dad's job. He was a draftsman. He used to work for IBM. And so we all moved to America. And my dad, funnily enough, always wanted to learn the sax. And my dad went out and bought a Buescher alto. And I thought this was brilliant when he bought this home and started practicing. So I kind of started practicing his sax. And that's how it all started. So I quickly got enthusiastic, and my first teacher was an American kind of wind band kind of guy, so who took me through the tune a day or whatever the kind of equivalent was in the States, you know. That's how it started, and then we came back to this country, and then I was just obsessed really from the beginning.
At what age did you move back to the UK?
Well, I was about 12.
Okay.
I was 12. We were only there for a year. Yeah. So I was 12 or even a bit younger. But I'd already been playing a bit, you know. So I started quite young.
Yeah.
So I started playing the sax. I never touched the clarinet. Well, I didn't touch the clarinet until quite a long time, which I kind of regret a bit. But you know what it's like. You know, hard to go from sax to clarinet rather than the other way.
Yeah, no one wants to hear the results that I've come up with from.
Well, we've all got those stories. But no, I was hooked, and that's all I ever wanted to do, was to be a musician. I didn't quite know that I wanted to be a jazz musician until a few years later, and then I kind of thought, this is what I want to do. I just want to play. So my dad played as a semi-pro with some people from IBM, and he got me involved. So I was I was going along to his rehearsals.
Great.
I've got a picture of me, kind of me like down here, really short, and all these big IBMers, playing in a little section. So yeah.
You reminded me. I had a funny thing with learning to play the saxophone in that. So I never met my father. He lives in Australia. And that's a whole extra story that doesn't need to go into public podcast. But I've never met the man and knew very, very little about him growing up. And only after I had chosen to play the saxophone at the age of 8, I think, the local music service came in and gave some demonstrations at the school or whatever. And I really wanted to play the saxophone, and it was only after we got hold of an instrument that my mum said to me that my dad had been mad about the saxophone and an amateur saxophone and bought one himself. So yeah, strange things hidden away in our genetics.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Yeah. Nature of nurture kind of thing. It's fascinating, all that,
Definitely, yeah. Fate or whatever else you want to think of it as, but I hate the idea of fate. But
I don't think I had a chance because I was getting nurture from my dad's record, and I was probably getting some genes from nature.
Exactly. So in that period, then. So say mid-teens or whatever, the way you started getting really into jazz, were there any recordings in particular that stand out for you as being seminal recordings in your head that pushed you into that direction, or was it a whole swarm of things?
At first, it was quite general. So the things that I mentioned, Count Basie, the Atomic Mr. Basie, my dad used to play all the time. I thought that was fantastic. And then as I started to work out a bit about what I liked, which was kind of the character of the various players, I kind of got involved in that quite early on, and I really liked Paul Desmond. I thought he sounded amazing. My dad had some Paul Desmond records with Dave Brubeck, but he also had some of his solo records. And Stan Getz I liked a lot. And big bands, my dad had some Ellington, and I was always intrigued with how all the saxophone players, they all sounded really different. There was 2 tenor players, but they didn't sound the same. There was, Johnny Hodges, who sounded completely not like Paul Desmond, but I loved how he played. And then when I listened to Ellington, I just heard all these people kind of sticking out. All these kind of wonderful sounds, blending, but not in a kind of even way, in a way. You know what I mean? So I think there was best of Duke Ellington my dad had, and it was the 60s, from the 60s, with all these great people, Gonzalez, and I love that. I used to play that record loads,
I'm going to skip a long way ahead to 2 projects, I suppose, had quite an influence on me growing up. I really love Perfect Houseplants. I got really into that years ago, and also through Rose-Coloured Glasses was one of my most listened to albums of my sort of mid-teens. And so jump ahead to that sort of time. Because I suppose, are they your sort of first sort of led projects? I know obviously Perfect Houseplants was a bit more maybe communal or between you.
Yeah.
Well, but that was, because obviously we had a big period with Loose Tubes, which well documented. So.
No, it's interesting, Kieran. I mean, I kind of did it in an unusual way, in a way, because I was you mentioned Loose Tubes. That was the first thing that people kind of started to know what I was doing. So it was, but I never wrote for Loose Tubes. I was always a bit kind of. I was always a bit intimidated about writing because the level of writing was so high. I mean, I wish I had written something now, So Perfect Houseplants was a kind of thing that came out of Loose Tubes, really, after Loose Tubes. And I met Hugh Warren, and we started playing a lot together, and I met Dudley Phillips. And we all had, for a while, we all had a band, and it was the 3 of us in each band, but with a different drummer. So we had this bizarre situation. We had a Hugh Warren band, Mark Lockhart band, Dudley Phillips band, all with the same three people and a different drummer. So at some point we sat down, I think we sat down at Hugh's one night and we said, well, why don't we just form a band that is, so we came up with this name, Perfect Houseplants. And we all kind of wrote for it, really, particularly Hugh and me. Dudley wrote a little bit for it. And that was a really important part for me to develop my writing, alongside Hugh's writing, because Hugh's writing was always I was always in awe of Hugh's writing, how beautiful his tunes were. And so the first bit of Houseplants was a little bit of me building up the courage to bring my tunes, but I did, luckily. And we went on and we did a lot. We did
there's 5 albums, isn't it?
We did 5, maybe 6, where we did an extra one with the Orlando console. Maybe it's 5. Which album did you hear?
It was New Folk Songs and Snap Clatter were the 2 that I had and was really into.
Yeah, I think a lot of people heard New Folk Songs. I think it was partly because we'd been together a long time, and also it came out on Lynn Records, and it was the first kind of proper label that we had at that time, for the music to come out. And that was amazing. We did a lot of gigs. We did collaborations with early music group, the Orlando Consort. We worked with Andrew Manzi, so kind of crossover things.
So whose idea was it to reach out with, say, like the Orlando Consort? Because that's not a pairing that you would necessarily immediately jump to. No,
I mean, we're all interested in all kinds of music. We've always been like that. All the people, particularly in that band, Hugh is very into classical music and folk and Brazilian music. But the early music group was a friend of Dudley's, sang in it, who he went to school with. So I think it was Dudley's idea that we get together. So we got together at a church and we improvised. And of course, the modes that they use are the same modes that we use for jazz. They're Dorian, they're Aeolian. So we had common language. We were, I mean, I remember clearly the first rehearsal where we got to this church in the city and we just improvised around the modes, and it sounded great, So then we went off and wrote some stuff.
So you managed to get together and really just sort of jam it out before you even put any... Brilliant.
Yeah, we kind of experimented and jammed it out, exactly as you say, and then that became a project, and it's wonderful, really, how those things happen, looking back. So that was Houseplants, which was obviously a massive thing for me, from writing and playing. But I didn't do my first album until under my own name until quite late, really, and that was the one you mentioned, Rose-Coloured Glasses.
It's because I was 94, I think. Is it?
Was it?
I think so.
It might have been later than that, actually.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
I think so. A bit later than that, like 98.
Oh, really? Is it that late? Oh, jeepers! Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I was a bit old in the tooth when and most people bring out a quartet album. Of course,
Well, this is it. Yeah, was it 12-piece band?
I brought out a 12-piece record that was impossible to kind of tour, But we did do quite a lot of gigs, but.
But it's a great record. I love the energy on it, and I was reading a bit of an interview you'd done a while ago. It sounds like it was a bit of I suppose in some ways a bit of a nightmare recording session. So I was amazed to read that against the sound that I have in my head. You tell us a little bit about all of the woes.
Yeah, well, just going back to why it wasn't a quartet album. I hear certain things at certain stages of my creative life, I suppose, and then I plunge in. I don't really think about what it's going to be, and I think with that I just started writing and realized that I was hearing the tunes for this band, for this 12-piece band.
Hmm.
So
it's not even a particularly orthodox instrumentation for that size. It's French horn and bass trombone, isn't that the with trumpet and so it's quite an unusual front line anyway.
Yeah, no, it was, looking back. I mean, I've always been up for just trying things, you know, and I'm quite bold. Sometimes I come unstuck with it, you know, and you think, how am I going to write for? But for that, we had two trumpets, a bass trombone, and a French horn. That was the brass, and then flute, alto, tenor, and then rhythm section. So anyway, we rehearsed it a little bit, and I did a little recording at the little demo at the premises in London, and that was that was really important. That was a reference point for me before I went and recorded it properly. And then I booked a studio, booked Livingston Studio in London. I didn't have any money, so I borrowed some secondhand 2-inch tape, which had another record. I can't tell you what record it was, but we recorded over this record. We got into the studio and we had these problems. We had technical problems with the fold back, you know, with the headphone mixes. There were big problems with the studio. Luckily, I had the most fantastic engineer who did all the Houseplants albums, a guy called Jerry O'Riordan. So he knew my thing. He'd done nearly all the Houseplants records. And we got things working. And then we didn't do much the first day. I had 2 days. The second day we got back in, it was all going great. And then Sid Gould, who was playing lead trumpet, got a message from his wife saying that she got into labour. So he had to go. Someone said, Henry Lowther lives up the road. Give him a call. So I phoned Henry Lowther, who I didn't know that well. And he said, yeah, it's fine. I'll just finish my tea and I'll come down. So he came down and started recording. So we'd done about half the tracks with Sid before we had to go.
Yeah. And
then it just went really quickly. And we just had an energy, a collective energy amongst us. And the most heavy kind of track on that, in terms of energy, is a tune called For Kicks. And I didn't think we'd have time to record it because it wasn't on my priority list. But anyway, everyone said, especially Martin France, who wanted to kind of have a bit of a play, said, let's do it. This is like half an hour before we should be out of the studio.
Yeah.
So we did it, and we did it in one take. And that's one of my favourite bits on that, because the energy's really up, and everyone's just getting stuck in, you know.
No, fantastic, and like I say, I'm glad to be able to ask you a bit about those, because they were worn down in my player years ago. So
it's very nice to hear that, because at the time I remember thinking, and with Houseplants too, that we made all these records and we took all this care with the mixing and the production, and then you think, what does anyone know about these records? You know. And this was the days before Facebook and Instagram, where people put stuff up and say, you know, and it was a bit like that with some of these things. Does anyone know about them? You know, we put all this effort in. So it's really nice to hear that you knew about it.
I'd had some friends who were really into Perfect Houseplants as well. So I'm thinking now ahead, when I went because I did a classical saxophone degree for my undergraduate, as a thing I might have said to you before. But
where did you do that?
The RNCM.
Oh, Royal Northern,
yeah. But some of the other classical sax players there were Perfect Houseplants fans as well. So you were reaching outside of the jazz world with it too.
Well, that's nice. That's really nice to know. Yeah.
No, I'm glad that can bring you a smile. So I wanted to ask you then, thinking about yourself as a writer, who have been big influences on you as a composer? Oh, obviously, you mentioned Ellington earlier. Sounds like that was probably an early one for sure. But
Yeah,
outside of the world of jazz or inside, whatever you
it's a
think.
good question. I mean, I guess there's so many things I've taken bits from lots and lots of people rather than from one or two. So, I mean, Django Bates is a big influence on me. He always has been. But Baccarat, I've always loved. I
Right.
love Baccarat. I think my dad used to play Baccarat record. Gil Evans. I mean, there was a record that I heard really early on of Gil Evans called "The Individualism of Gil Evans," which is from the '60s, and I was obsessed with that. The writing on it is so brilliant. I love some film writers. I love Nino Rota, Italian film writer. I like Morricone. I like, I mean, so many people. I was massively into Pat Metheny from a writing point of view as well.
Yeah.
For a long time, I thought his way of writing, I still do. I mean, it's fantastic writing, you know.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, everyone really. John Adams, I like. Stravinsky, obviously. You know, I mean, it's always been, you know, from all these people, I'll take ideas about orchestration, about structure. You know, the thing I discovered about Baccarat is that he works in unusual bar lengths and things, and somehow makes it all sound effortless. You know, 5-bar phrases, amazing harmony. You know, so I think I've always been quite a good listener in terms of when I listen to music. I kind of enjoy it, but I've realised that I've been quite analytical as well at times. You know, and I always say that to students. You know, we do this. I teach a bit of composition at the Guildhall, and I kind of do this test on them. I say, right, we're going to listen to this track, and I put it on, and I say, I want you to tell me everything that you notice about it. So we put this on, and it's hilarious because some of them notice loads of stuff, and other people don't really notice anything. They just kind of enjoy it, and you know, and I guess there's no right or wrong about it, you know. But so then I do a little go on a bit about saying, well, maybe you should pick up a few things, you know, about bar lengths, you know, what's coming in, the structure, the orchestration. You know. So I think all those things from those people have influenced me. You know,
if there was maybe, well, I suppose maybe, if you had to name a small number of individual pieces that you've maybe sat and really gone in depth on at any point. So say, you know, you mentioned Stravinsky. Obviously, it's you know, you can spend your life going in deep just on Stravinsky. But are there any specific pieces by any of those composers that you've really checked out inside out and backwards that you've kept with you?
There's things that I've tried to work out on the piano. You know, My Song was a big influence. That first tune, Quest Star.
Yeah.
Just about pedal points, you know, and how that works. I mean, I don't really know how they work, but I've kind of absorbed various things from it. I think there was a Garbarek tune, a slow tune on that album with Egberto and Charlie Hayden, Folk Songs. You know that record? I don't know if you know that, but there was a tune on that is a very slow 6/8 tune that was the inspiration for me writing a tune on Rose-Colored Glasses, actually, with The Way of the Road. It's even in the same key, actually, but I'm happy to say it's not a rip-off. It doesn't really sound like anything. You know, they don't sound similar once they start.
Yeah.
So I checked that tune out a lot. I checked out Rite of Spring a bit, you know, with the score and with scores and stuff, and Yeah, and some Wayne Shorter tunes. I've kind of looked at the structure of them, in terms of not just the harmonic structure, the kind of phrase, the phrase structure. I think that's really important. The older I get and the more I kind of understand about the process of writing.
Is that early Wayne tunes or later?
For me, it was later. It was albums like Atlantis and not Joyrider. What was the other one called around that time? But the older albums, High Life. That was quite an important album for me. And Atlantis, I was obsessed with. And I hear various influences in some of my records later on that were from Atlantis, But yeah, the older I get, the more I realise that the most important thing about writing is the kind of phrase, the shape of the phrase, whatever it is, whether it's an abstract phrase or a traditional kind of phrase, if you like, and then the counterpoint that goes with it. So, that's kind of always where I start, and I think I probably learnt that from some of those examples, like the Jarrett thing of having that with that with that. So basically, counterpoint,
Beautiful. Well, it feels like that's a really nice place to delve into the first track that you've picked out, so that people can hear some of these influences perhaps coming through. So you sent over two videos that are both from Days on Earth. So I suppose we talk a little bit more in depth about that whole project a little later on, but could you give us a little introduction? The first one is Brave World, and This Much I Know Is True. Could you give us a little introduction to this before we have a listen, please?
Yeah, so there are two pieces. So Brave World is a very short piece. It's like an introduction. And then it segues into This Much I Know Is True. And they're quite different in a way. Brave World is material from an older record from Moving Air. It's the first bit of a piece off that record. And it's a kind of slow, romantic, kind of through composed piece of music, I suppose. And then there's some abstract, a bass solo over some abstract kind of atonal chords. And then it goes into the bulk of the piece is this thing, modal piece based on a 5-bar phrase in the bass. Boom, good-a-good-ding, 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 gong, gong, gong. Good-a-good-ding, is that 4 bars? Ding, good-a-good-ding, 4-bar phrase, sorry. There's another piece, 5-bar phrase. And then the whole thing was, for me, the challenge for that piece was to use a very simple ingredient to start with, source material, and develop it. And that's what I tried to do with that piece.
Beautiful. Well, sit back and enjoy. This is Brave World going into This Much I Know Is True.
tell me what's on your study book there?
Well, this.
Yeah.
It's not mine actually, it's Emily's, but it's the Ian Dixon Scales for Obsessives.
I'm going to have to get that. Is it on? Can you buy it easily?
Yeah, it's Andy Scott's publishing company, Astute Music.
Oh, I'll get that. That's brilliant.
It's the one that just goes through every mode in every key of major, melodic minor, harmonic minor, and harmonic major. It's got the whole thing spelt out with the appropriate matching chord symbols and things like that. But,
oh, that's handy.
Yeah, it's good reference book with students and stuff like that. So everything is to say, that's it, you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, it's really good reminding yourself of all that and getting it under the fingers again.
Especially when you get down to, you know, how he's got oh, sheepers. You know, when it starts getting to, you know, like, when he's got the modes of C flat harmonic major written out for you. Starts becoming a bit more of a head wrecker as it goes.
It's a great title.
Yeah. Lovely. So that was the Guildhall ensemble performing with Mark there for Brave World Into This Much I Know Is True. So you got to do this with as we'll see later on with Trinity as well. But this is a project you got to do with some student ensembles. How did you find working with the student group putting the music together?
They were great. I mean, for the core of it, I had the rhythm section. I had the rhythm section that was the professional rhythm section. So I had Seb Rochford, Tom Herbert, John Paracelli. So they went with both student groups. But the students were great. I mean, it was a learning curve for me because I'd never written for strings. So I was finding out a lot of stuff, and they were very patient, particularly Trinity, because I workshopped some of the music at Trinity. I didn't do all the music at Trinity that's on the record, but early versions of stuff I took to Trinity because that's where I do most of my teaching work. Yeah. And they were great, you know, they were really good. There was good suggestions from people as well about what you can do and what you can't do, you know, double stopping, things like that. And but by the time we did it at the Guildhall, which was later, it was when the record came out. So in effect, the gig at Milton Court was the first performance of it, if you like.
Yeah.
By the time I did it there, I was more sorted. I'd rewritten some of it. I'd retweaked some of it. So it was easier in a way to get the music together.
Yeah. No, great. Yeah. Listen, I'm going to jump again, and I'm going to jump to last year's Manchester Jazz Festival. So we were very fortunate. We had you come and play with as part of Malaysia with for anyone who doesn't know who's listening, that's your trio with Liam Noble and Jasper Hoyby. And that was a great gig. I hope you guys enjoyed yourselves.
Yeah, we loved it. Yeah.
It was a beautiful set. So that Malaysia, how old? About 5 years old as a group, maybe something like this. It's a fairly recent thing, is it?
Yeah, I think 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
But so what made you put together the trio? And obviously it's a drumless trio, which is maybe slightly more unusual in the jazz world. And what made you want to work in that setting at that point with those people?
Well, it was partly necessity because I applied for this jazz service thing to go to Rochester Jazz Festival in America. It's a showcase. I don't know if you know about it. They used to do it every year. It was called something. Not The Brits Are Coming, but it was something like that. And so I applied for this for my Ellington band, which is 7 people, and they said, "We'd love you to do it, but we can't take the Ellington band." So I thought about it, because they can only fund a certain amount of things. They basically give you a little bit of money towards airfares.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, I can't go with the Ellington thing. Why don't I just do it with a few people? And I didn't have a current small group at that time. So I thought I'll do it with Liam and Jasper, who I like working with. So that's how the band started. So our first gig was at Rochester Jazz Festival.
Yeah, brilliant.
So we rehearsed quite a lot in London. We got a load of tunes together. We all wrote for that. So like Houseplants, it was a kind of collective at first, although it kind of became my band as it went on. And so we went to Rochester, and that's how the band was formed, really.
And so you've got two albums out now with Malaysia. Great recordings. How much do you think that trio are you planning to do more with in the next one? Obviously, Jasper's based back in Copenhagen now, so slightly more of a challenge putting things together, perhaps. But is there a third album brewing somewhere, or is it on the side for now?
I guess it's on the side for now. I'd love to do more with it, and if someone phoned up and said, we'd like you to offer you a gig, I'd be like, yeah, we'll come and do it. But it's very hard, in this country to launch things. And I mean, I've kind of realised that I've been a bit naive in the past about launching bands and new bands, and and I think with that band, I think it was quite tricky because we didn't have drums, and I think the music, well, the music, it's quite subtle, some of it, so you have to kind of make sure people know what it is, before you try and get a gig. And but I mean, I'm sure we'll do something with it, either another record or some gigs at some point.
Well, we unfortunately we can't book you for every MJF stage that we do, but we certainly.
I know, what a shame that is. I mean, our gig. Just going back to our gig, I didn't know that gig at all. I'd heard great things about it. And
no, that was very kind. Thanks. Yeah.
It was one of our favourite gigs, actually, because it's just such a welcoming place from the audience, and it's focused, wasn't it?
Yeah, we've got a fantastic crowd of people, so we're very grateful to them all for.
Well, I hope you can take some of them when things get better, and to wherever you.
Well, there's very positive news on that front that's I think imminently about to become public. But when we hit stop on the record, I can give you a
can't wait.
Sneak preview into that. But thankfully some really positive things. Keep your eyes peeled, everyone. So I'd like to jump again now. This time to Days Like These. So this is an album you did over in Germany with the NDR big band. So have I got the right one of the radio big bands? So it was NDR.
NDR.
Yeah. Lovely. So first of all, how did that come about? Because I'm not sure of the process. Do they approach you to do a collaboration? Do you approach them? How does the whole thing work? Because it's an amazing thing that they have in Germany and in bits of Scandinavia and all around the radio big band thing that is extremely sadly lacking in the UK. That there's no centralised hub that you can bring these large scale works to. As you know yourself, having done lots of fairly large ensemble projects, trying to put together a whole thing from scratch each time is a massive undertaking, and having that existing thing is something really special. So how did that whole thing come about, and how did you find the experience? Well,
it kind of led on out of the Scratch band that was the band on Rose Coloured Glasses. So through Rose Coloured Glasses, we did an album called Imaginary Dances. So I had 2 records with that lineup. And then I can't quite remember, but Ian Thomas, the drummer, the great drummer, was working with them. And I was working with Ian a bit with John Paracelli, and Ian said, give me some recordings so I can give them to the producer out there of yours. So that's how it happened. So
brilliant.
I gave him those 2 CDs, and he went out to work with them, and he gave them to Axel, the guy who runs the NDR in Hamburg. And Axel really liked the music, and although I hadn't written for big band much, well, a little tiny bit, but I hadn't really written much big band music before, he liked the music and got in touch and said, would I like to come out and record some music? So I wrote some music very quickly. I rearranged the Houseplants tune from Snap Clatter for big band, which ended up as the first track on the album, tune called Rag. And again, it was a big learning curve. So I was kind of plunged into this challenge of writing some music, and I made a few mistakes. The biggest mistake was I did my own copying on, Sibelius. And I'm not that neat. So I get out there with all my parts and we start working on it, and some of them are complaining that the parts aren't very good. And then Axel said to me, why didn't you get our copyist? We have a full-time copyist with the orchestra.
Wow.
So you can imagine how I felt about that. I was like, oh, why didn't... I mean, they didn't tell me, and But, if I should have thought that might have been there,
I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? Everything's just sort of on a platter for you, almost.
Well, it's amazing, and they have this, as you said, they have it in Western Germany. They have, I think they have 3 of them, don't they? 3.
Yeah.
But it was a great week. Despite my copying, formatting Sibelius skills, it was a great week, and it turned out okay,
Well, yeah, certainly. And from a slightly nuts and bolts perspective, when you're starting a project like this off your own back, obviously one of the big hurdles to get across is finding funding to put it all together. It's not an inexpensive business to put together a large ensemble project like that. When you get approached by someone like NDR, does that mean there's no need for you to worry about any of that side of things? Is that all taken care of, and you just have the joy of writing the music and going and doing it?
Yeah, well, for that, and it was basically for a broadcast.
Yeah.
So the recording was originally a broadcast, but then I managed to negotiate a small fee for them to let me release it.
Yeah, incredible.
But it's an amazing thing. They have a full-time band that are all on salaries. So I go out, and we had a week. We had 5 days to make that record, and I mean, they only kind of play till about 2, and then they knock off and go home. So it's quite, it's not like every day like you do over here. You use every hour to record a record. It's very relaxed in a way. I would have loved to have done a tour or something, but as you say, in England, I need a massive amount of funding to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
well, speaking of needing a massive amount of funding to put something large together, let's finally get to Days on Earth again and have a bit more of a delve into that. So, how was the seed of the project you deciding, I've not written for strings yet, let's go the whole hog and put it all together, or did someone approach you about writing for orchestra, or how did the whole project come about, and what were you trying to achieve with Days on Earth?
I was just trying to achieve losing a lot of money. It's a joke, by the way, folks. No, seriously, it was, I started with some improvised ideas, because a lot of my process with writing is to do with improvising. And I sometimes feel that I don't have a method, really. I think I've acquired some kind of method over the years, but I improvise quite a lot to get ideas. And I had these ideas. I think I heard it quite orchestral rather than big band, so I didn't really hear it as a big band thing. I heard it as being quite lush and some of it quite dissonant. And so as I started writing and getting more involved, I think I just heard a kind of a certain orchestration, actually, looking back on it now, of, you know, some high woodwind and brass section and strings, but I wanted it quite groovy. So I wanted some of the things that we had a little bit in Polar Bear with kind of grooves. So even though it didn't turn out quite like that in the end, but because the writing went in different directions, but yeah, that was important, that I had this kind of groovy thing on some of it, and that's why I wanted Seb Rochford and Tom to do it. And Liam was always, I can't really think of anyone that I'd rather play with than Liam, really, you know, in terms of my own music at the moment.
Yeah.
Liam and Hugh Warren, you know. So I started writing, realised that I was onto something quite big in terms of resources. Just kept on it. I didn't have any commission, really. I had to generate some interest. So I went to Trinity and I said, how about, can we do something here? And they said, well, we can't really pay for anything, you know, but we can do it with the students. So I then went to talked to John Cumming at Sirius, and he said they would come in on a gig in the foyer of the London Jazz Festival, which is where the Believers clip is taken from. And he said what they can do is, they can't really pay us a fee, but they would pay the costs of rehearsing it for the professional musicians.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's what they did. So it, right. in a way, that ended up a kind of little commission where they were paying for the musicians to rehearse, the professional musicians.
Yeah.
And then we started to rehearse and develop it at Trinity.
So essentially you got almost an opportunity to workshop your compositional ideas with the Trinity ensemble that then... Yeah. And then you were able to... So you, like you said earlier, this was a freelance orchestra that you ended up putting together for the recording.
Yeah.
How did that all crystallise?
Well, I realised that, you know, we did a really good job with it, but I knew that it was going to sound how I wanted it to sound with professional musicians. You know, it's just that thing, isn't it? It's that difference between, you know, really good students and, you know, there is a difference, and you don't always...
How do you even go about, you know, in the position that you're in, were these musicians you knew? So say like in the strings, if, you know, you haven't worked particularly much with string writing before, so did you work on recommendations for who to get in, who would be great for this kind of project, or did you know some people?
It was a bit of both for the orchestra, but the strings I didn't know really many string players, and they like to work together, you see, strings. That's the other thing I realised. Yeah. You can't just phone up so-and-so, you know, plays a violin and expect them to work with. Yeah. So John Paracelli recommended Jackie Shave to lead it.
Okay.
So she led it. I talked to her. She suggested a fixer who fixes sessions.
Great.
And he fixed the strings for me, and he was great. He fixed all people who were up for doing something that's, you know, interesting, well, hopefully, and was jazzy. So I had a wonderful string section. The woodwind, as I mentioned earlier on, was a mixture of classical and jazz. I did some work at the Opera House once on a turnage opera, and there was a lovely clarinetist there called Nick Rodell, and so I asked him to do it on first clarinet and James Alsop on bass clarinet. So there was a classical guy but Nick likes jazz as well, I knew that.
Right.
Roland Sutherland on flute and a classical flautist as the other flautist.
Brilliant.
mostly session brass players who I knew would just read it and it would all be fine, because I was under a lot of pressure with paying for this expensive studio, so it had to be, it was all that stuff.
Yeah. How long did you have to record that? Was that a pressurized thing, or?
We did it in 4 sessions, 4 3-hour sessions.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
that was 2 days.
Yeah,
basically.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, it's turned out beautifully. So I hope you're happy with how it all went.
Yeah, I was really happy with it. I'm very proud of that record, and it took a lot of mixing. It took to get it as I wanted it, and but considering all those people, apart from the rhythm section, went in and it was sight reading, it's amazing.
Yeah, well,
incredible musicians we have in this country.
Right. Yeah. And having done orchestral work with BBC Phil and Halle, and seeing how tight the rehearsal time is to turn around a program. It's I think the UK is famous in classical circles for having in obscene turnaround times for really challenging things. You do end up with the best sight readers in the world in the UK, so I believe.
No, I think you're right. I think the standard of orchestral playing in this country is amazing.
Mm-hmm. But like you say, in Germany, you go and you have a whole week to put together one program.
Mm.
I remember going in and doing BBC Phil rehearsals, and there was 3 programs and a recording session going on in that 1 week, and you've got these tiny amounts of time to run. You have a 30-minute rehearsal for a 20-minute piece, and that's it before the concert. Sometimes it seems.
I know. It's mad, isn't it?
Anyway, but listen, so that feels like the perfect time to sit and have a listen to Believers then. So this is again from Days on Earth, but as you said, this is with the Trinity Ensemble now. This isn't the same concert as previous. So was this at the London Jazz Festival then?
Yeah, so this happened before the other one, so maybe I should have said play this one first, but it doesn't matter. But so this was one of the pieces that I did have quite early on that we did with Trinity.
And it also features Alice Leggett, we should say.
Alice Leggett does a great solo on it. John Perocelli, recorded live in the Claw Ballroom, yeah.
Beautiful.
2016, 17? I can't remember what year it was now.
Well, regardless of the year, sit back and enjoy and have a listen. This is Believers. Lovely. Well, thanks very much. That was Believers. Beautiful playing from everyone there. I wanted to also pick your brains. You've like I said earlier, quite an eclectic career with Radiohead, June Tabor, and and anything else in between. Is it last year that you did the sort of classical crossover chamber album, or was it the year before
No,
that?
it came out last year.
Came out last year. Yeah.
So a friend of mine who I was at college with, John Ashton Thomas, he's a film orchestrator,
Hmm.
and he had this idea of recording some Renaissance music in a church with an organist, and he asked me if I'd be interested in doing it. He didn't know what instrument, I think, at that time. So we went in and recorded about half of the tracks on this album, Salvatore Mundi, in Temple Church with Roger Sayer. He's the choir master and the organist at Temple Church. And the whole thing wasn't ever meant to be a record. We were just recording it kind of for fun, really, and to see what happened. There was a possibility of it maybe going out on a library label or something, so it was a bit vague, but it was John's idea. John did the arranged the pieces. And we went in and we did some Thomas Tallis, some Purcell, etc. Or a kind of mixture of things. Mm-hmm. And it turned, the first session it sounded really lovely. And so then we went back 6 months later and recorded the rest of the record in the same church.
Yeah, beautiful.
And got the same sound. And yeah, it's a record that I'm really pleased with, because I don't really know what people made of it. I'm sure some classical people turned their nose up a bit with it, but it was never meant to be a classical record. It was just meant to be a recording of music with improvising in it, and so that's how that happened. And I think people seem to like it, and I'm glad it's out there for people to hear.
But I have to hold my guilty hands and say I haven't had the chance to sit and have a listen to it, so that's on my list to do now over the weekend.
That's fine. But yeah, and we did have quite a lot of concerts lined up, and then of course
for this year,
we were going to do some classical festivals with it. So,
well, does that all based around specific organs then?
It's all around organs and churches, yeah.
Because Kit did a beautiful tour of organs, didn't he? A few years ago.
He did, yeah. I was going to pick his brains about it, and then of course everything stopped. But we had a gig in Romania, and we had a gig in Dorset, various places, around the country. So,
hopefully, next year or the year after, it'll be happening. There's a few beautiful organs in Manchester, so hopefully, get a chance to have a listen.
Yes, well, as soon as things get straight, I'll be on the phone to various venues with organs, I think.
Definitely. Well, so speaking of future plans, then. We obviously the whole world is up in the air at the moment, but I know you have a tour planned at the back end of the year with a new quartet lineup with Elliot Galvin, Tom Herbert, and Dave Smith. Obviously, probably impossible to to say much at the moment. Does it look like some of that is intact at the moment, or are you planning to take a step back and have a deep breath and go for it again as soon as you can?
Yeah, it's just timing, because we had it all lined up. We had some gigs in April, you see, mostly in the Midlands, some gigs for Birmingham Jazz. Phil Rose had given us 4 or 5 gigs. So that was going to be our kick-off point to records, and then I booked a studio in May.
Oh, man.
So we've still got to go through that stage, probably, of playing the music in a bit before we can record.
Yep.
But we only need a few gigs to happen, so with a bit of luck, October, November. I spoke to the guy at Wakefield Jazz the other day, and I think they're hoping to still do it.
Great.
And then we've got some other 2 or 3 other gigs. So, but realistically, it might not happen until next year. That.
Well, we'll certainly wait with anticipation. Have you already written some of the music then for that?
I've written all the music, actually.
You've written all of it? Great.
It's all ready to go.
It's all ready to go.
It was all written very quickly. It was a kind of burst of creativity.
Great, yeah.
And we did about 3 gigs, I think, before lockdown.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The last gig was at the Crypt, and that was really nice. And then, of course, the world has changed for us all.
And so what's the, maybe ethos is the wrong word, but what's been the tact with this quartet as distinct to previous projects? What's been your idea with this group? It's
about sonically, it's very different. I think it's going to be very different. It's developing the kind of groove thing. Mm-hmm. So there won't be much jazz or any swing in it, but it will be groove based. Elliot's just playing keyboards. Mm-hmm. I've got some effects on the saxophone that I'm working on. I guess the main thing is it's quite simple. Some of it, it's less complicated in terms of the writing. Mm-hmm. And at the moment where I am, I like that. So I'm kind of interested in trying to do that more at the moment, try and simplify things down to the essence of something. I mean, yeah. I guess that's what we're all trying to do all the time, but I'm trying to use simpler ingredients with this project.
Would you say that that's also leading to a bit more freedom in the moment as well? Yeah,
definitely. So there won't be so much writing. There'll be a lot of much more improvising in it than some of my other projects.
Yeah.
So hopefully it will be very fluid and it can shift and change.
Yeah. Certainly look forward to hearing it when we finally can, and hopefully you up and playing at NQ Jazz whenever. And wherever that is, yeah.
So
what else does the future hold then? Have you got any other projects bubbling in the back of your mind, or even already down pen on paper, or are you just taking stock at the moment? Where are you at?
I think I've been taking stock and reflecting. I think a lot of people have been reflecting, actually.
Certainly, yeah.
About all this and where you fit into a world, and it's very worrying when it's in such a grim state, art at the moment in this country. So I'm taking stock, but I'm pleased to say I'm still being creative. So I'm writing. Before I spoke to you, I was writing something, and I don't know what it's for yet.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a pattern over the last few weeks, just writing something but not knowing what it's for.
Yeah.
But I'm confident I'll find a place for it, or I'll develop it into something. So it's just a good thing to do for me to do.
Well, I'm certainly glad to hear that you're back in that headspace, after difficult while a few months ago. So, very very glad to hear that. And well, listen, Mark, and thank you so much for your time and for joining us for the chat today. And we're certainly looking forward to having you back at NQ Jazz as and when we can.
It's been a pleasure, and keep doing what you guys do up there. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Thanks very much. We'll certainly try our best. Take care, and we'll talk again soon. All the best.
See you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Hello again, NQ Jazz fans. Thanks so much for taking the time to tune in, and a huge thanks to Mark for his time. It was an absolute pleasure chatting to him and reminiscing about some great recordings on top of everything else. As always, please head over to patreon.com/NQJazz. Please check out all the things we have going on there. Please do consider subscribing. It is not a lot of money, and it will go a huge way towards helping keep musicians active in this period. Take care, and we hope to see you again in the future very soon. All the best. Bye-bye.